one of them just goes, we should start a brewery. And they're like, yeah.
And then they did it.
8 years later.
Oh.
Welcome to the Charlotte Buzz, where we drink beer from local breweries while telling stories about the neighborhoods they're from. I'm Chrissy, and this is Drew.
Today, we are drinking Stellar Evolution from Town Brewing. It is a hazy pale ale with lactose, 5.5%.
I'm growing because we chose a pale ale instead of an IPA.
Okay.
But,
Small steps,
hazy.
I guess.
I mean, tiny
You just
baby
took the
steps.
eye out.
But, yeah. Can I also say that if you're watching this online, you'll see this, but the branding of this crowler is very similar to the cider from Sycamore.
Is it?
I feel like it is with this kind of circle-y thing.
It seems very King Canary to me. Same shape, same blue and gold.
Also true. I mean, to a certain degree, I guess they all kind of blend together, but that was what I had originally thought of when I looked at it, as I thought of the cider. But all right, so keep telling us. Or wait before you keep reading. Should we not do what we did last week, and should we taste it before you continue to read?
I don't know. Whatever you want to do.
Infect us with the flavor notes.
Sure.
All right, then. Will you take a sip of that and tell me what you taste before you read all that? Did you already read it before you? Okay.
I mean, I read it the other day, but...
Right. It smells good. It's got a nice light color. Hazy. Tell me what you think while I drink.
It'll drink.
Okay.
I don't know.
It does definitely have a yeah, you're used to playing off mine first. It's like it does have that definitely, like, I know that like hazy isn't exactly a taste, but like you can taste it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, I don't know, but it definitely has that hazy feel and taste. I'd say it's decently fruity, but not like overly sweet or anything.
Yeah, it's pretty light. It's good summer beer. I feel like but
it's hazy, so it feels like heavier than it should. Like, it feels like it's a light beer, but because the hazy, it feels a little thicker and heavier, but it's not thick or heavy.
I'm not getting any of this lactose. I don't even know what that means.
Well, you hadn't read that yet. So, okay, so read it to us now.
I mean, I did say it was a hazy pale ale with lactose.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly, I was
so
paying
it's like
attention.
milk sugar.
Yes.
But I don't know.
Which we did this last week when we talked about the milkshake IPA, and, lactose is a sugar. It doesn't necessarily have a flavor. It's just, like, you're not going to taste milk or anything. But
yeah. It says, an explosion of juicy tropical and citrus aroma from the addition of Eldorado, Citra, Cryo Mosaic, and Amarillo hops.
Is that all of them?
Yeah, probably. Make this hazy pale ale an unforgettable experience. Lactose milk sugar lends a silky smooth body and balances the intensity of the hops.
I would agree with all that. I mean, obviously it is what it is. So, me agreeing or disagreeing doesn't change it.
I'm not getting an explosion of juicy tropical and citrus.
I mean, I
aroma and flavor.
I think that's the thing is, like I said, I felt like it was very fruity, but not overpoweringly so. And that's kind of what it said at the end with the lactose, is it said it balanced something with the hops. And so I think it does like have a very fruity flavor, but it's toned down a smidge, that it's not super like in your face about it. And I really, the more I'm going through all this learning that I like Citra hops. I like it. It'll definitely drink. It's pretty high on my list.
I'd call it a light hazy.
I would agree with that.
It's not, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's not much to it, I wouldn't say.
I like it a lot, though. Definitely
it's pretty good.
Higher on my list.
Mm-hmm.
It'll drink. I'm a happy camper.
I will say, if you like the color purple, get Indigo Wolf.
Yes.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's an IPA. Yeah, it's an IPA with, I don't know what the purple was in it, I forget. But that, if you can set it down and then also look at it into the sunlight, that's a gorgeous looking beer.
You can't really tell just sitting there.
It looks almost like grape juice, but like much like watered down grape juice, or like purple Gatorade kind of. But it's a beer, and it doesn't taste bad. Yeah. It's just super interesting to look at.
But that comes from butterfly pea flowers, not PEE, but PEA.
Fair enough.
You got anything about town?
Yes, sir. So Town Brewing, one of our newer additions to the brewery scene here in Charlotte. They've been open about 7 months now. They opened the end of September of 2018. And we actually went, I believe it was opening day.
Yeah,
I was going to say maybe opening weekend, but I think it was just later in the day on that opening day. Really cool place. It's in Fremore West, just on the outskirts of Uptown, and it's right near Rhino Market there.
Mm-hmm. And the Charlotte Fencing Club.
Yes, that is true, because, you just want to drink and then stab people with a sword. Yeah. Why not? So it's really funny to me if you go on their website and you read through this, like their story of how they became a brewery. It's such a
Isn't it like bankers?
Lawyers.
Or lawyers, okay.
It's such a guy's story, where it was literally one of them was home brewing and they're all hanging out and in their garage, and one of them just goes, we should start a brewery, and they're like, yeah,
and then they did it
8 years later.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's also funny to me because there's this scene in How I Met Your Mother. Well, there's several of them, but there's one specific where they say, we should buy a bar, and there's these kind of forward things that guys tend to do, and it's we should start a band, we should buy a bar, we should do all these things, and throughout the show they kind of do them, and it's just chaos, and it's just those it seems like such a typical guy thing based on that show and how they portray it, of handful of guys just hanging around having a few beers, nobody's super drunk, but just enough where you're anything is possible, and they're yeah, we should do this, and that's exactly how this brewery started. And so that was in 2010. And then went through actually trying to work through some of the logistics. And then they even say in their story, what held it up were some actual logistical things. And then some were just excuses and kind of laziness per se, and that kind of stuff. And then in 2014, one of their wives started, she found an article in the newspaper that was opening a brewery, here's your new home type of a thing, and left it out for him. And so that started them actually searching for a location. And so that was already 4 years after they really had the idea to move forward with it. And then they go through this funny scene of their wives were super supportive and their friends and all this other stuff. And they met with all kinds of people, and then they hired a CFO, and the CFO was no, don't do it. Stick to your day jobs. And they're cool. So we fired our CFO and then carried on. And I just thought it was really funny. And then lo and behold, come 2018, they finally get a place and get it going. And 8 years later, brewery.
Nice.
But there you go. Just really cool little place. Has a really nice atmosphere. Good branding. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good beer.
Cool van. They've got front.
Yes. They're in a good location to do a lot of because when I very first moved down here with people I barely knew, I ended up running a 5K in Fremore West, and had no idea where any of that. And we basically started in that parking lot and then took off. And so just kind of a cool full circle thing for me. But Yeah, good location, good food, good beer. So, we're going to be talking about the general Fremore West area, the historic West End, all of this area that I'm not super familiar with in terms of, like, anyone kind of knows, oh, here's where Noda is, here's where Plaza is. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know what Fremore West is, but that is, you know, kind of that newer, sort of like Loso. It's one of the newer names for it, one of the newer brandings. And so if you just start searching stuff on that, you pretty much just end up with, like, housing and apartments and places to rent versus history of that area. So
yeah, I'd say West End is
more of an appropriate
uptown
term.
And the airport.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the correct way to look at it, but that's what.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right. So, what do you have to tell us today?
Well, I am going. Well, a few weeks ago, I talked about a historic property that was recently bought
with trees.
Yeah, the Van Landingham estate in Plaza Midwood. So now I'm going to talk about another historic landmark that just got put on the market this month. The Excelsior Club.
That sounds really familiar.
Yeah, it's been in,
like, I don't know what it is, but it sounds really familiar.
News scene for like a year now.
Okay.
It was Charlotte's first black nightclub and was a membership-based meeting spot for the who's who of Charlotte's black professionals. Jimmy McKee started it in 1944.
Also sounds really familiar. I feel like I read an article on this, but probably like a year ago, and so that's why I'm like, it's ringing a lot of bells, but I can't place any of it.
Yeah, I'd say, you'll probably know more about it soon.
Okay.
Jimmy was a mail clerk by day. Bartender by night.
Hey.
And he noticed that his community didn't have a nightclub of their own. So he bought a 2-story house on Beatty's Ford Road and started himself up one.
Nice. I dig that.
Yeah. The name Excelsior comes from, or he got that name from his lawyer, who told him to exceed all others.
Nice.
So Excelsior means, or translated loosely from Latin, meaning ever upward. May sound familiar for New York folk. It is the state motto, Excelsior.
Oh, I did know that.
And
I'm not from New York. I'm from Pennsylvania. We're the Keystone State, man.
Yeah, what is?
But
Also,
we're a Commonwealth. We're the Keystone State is our, like, license plate motto, but we're a Commonwealth. Tell me how that works.
Nobody knows what any of that means.
I don't either. Anyway.
Also, comic book geeks may know it from Stan Lee. When he, in the mid-1960s, after Atlas Comics rebranded as Marvel, Lee wrote a monthly column for the comics publisher in which he'd sign off with Excelsior. He wanted a unique word that his rivals wouldn't copy. He would, like, leave little catchphrases at the end, like "nuff said" or stuff like that, and people would basically rewrite the articles and leave that, like, copy his sign-off phrase.
Yeah.
So he did Excelsior, and he's like, nobody knows what this means, and they definitely can't spell it. So he started using that. Yeah. I said it was a membership club. These members included doctors, lawyers, educators, ministers, businessmen, and political leaders.
Okay.
In order to get your membership, you were screened and had to be recommended by a member that was already a member.
I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it's not a lot, but for like a nightclub.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a social club than like a nightclub per se.
I gotcha.
There's
not
in
quite
this
like
house,
bylaws and stuff, but kinda.
There may have been.
I see. I understand.
But he had like different rooms. There was like the ballroom and meeting rooms and stuff like that.
I gotcha.
So I thought it's just cool that he took a normal house and turned it into his dream.
Yeah.
You know.
I love that.
And it ended up being the leading private black social club in the Southeast.
Cool.
So, you know, started in 44, and a lot of good music acts came through there. You've probably heard a few of these. Nat King Cole. Louis Armstrong.
Hey.
James Brown.
Oh.
And one that I hadn't heard of till recently, Sam Cooke.
I know that.
The Netflix documentary that I was telling you about.
Yes. I was like, why do I know that name?
Yeah.
That's exactly why I know that name.
If you haven't seen that, go watch that.
I have.
It's pretty interesting.
Like you told me all about it, but
Yeah.
I still haven't watched it.
It's so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Get it, Charlotte, man.
The club was also the meeting place for several local civic groups and community organizations.
Okay.
One of those was the 100 Club that McKee helped start himself. And it was just a community organization that raised money for the local Johnson C. Smith University.
Okay. It took me a minute because you said the 100 Club and my brain was like triggered and I was like, oh, 700 Club. Is that old dude who talks church in the middle of the night on TV?
Yes.
Okay. Because I was like, that doesn't, like, that's where my brain went. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And then finally processed of like, whoa. Okay.
100 Club.
Yes. Cool.
In 1946, the white Democratic candidate for sheriff, Clyde Hunter, stopped into the club to canvass for black votes and ended up winning. Ever since then, black and white political leaders or political candidates have campaigned to Charlotte's African-American community by going to Excelsior.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah. Even Bill Clinton went there in 1992.
Did he play his sax there too?
I don't know.
He should have.
Yeah, that would have made sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. We should try to find some footage.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's become this meeting place and a great way for political candidates to gauge the community. But McKee died of cancer in 1985.
Yikes.
So he had it for 41 years.
I mean, that's actually kind of impressive that he survived for 40, regardless of whatever kind it was, even because of just medical care. Okay.
But since then, the Excelsior has passed around quite a bit and have struggled. Ken Kuntz bought the club from him right before he died, and he was the first African-American news reporter and anchor at WBTV.
That's cool. I just love like compounding history. I think that's cool.
From there, the club passed to North Carolina State Representative Pete Cunningham, who sold the club to prominent local civil rights attorney James Ferguson. And Ferguson worked with helped litigate school desegregation cases in North Carolina in the 70s.
Okay.
So there's another compounding history. Yeah. I had a hard time understanding because he sold the club, but he kept the property. Because later he dies and passes it on to his wife, Carla.
Okay.
Who's also a state representative.
Nice.
But that was a little confusing to me, but he just sold the club, not so much the property.
I gotcha.
So, yeah, following her husband's death, Carla took over and ended up foreclosing on Ferguson in 2016. Okay. And that's when, like, the club's no more. They had planned on reopening the club after renovations, but it was too expensive. They had a lot of, like, code violations, which seems weird to me because I thought things were, like, grandfathered in.
Yeah, I was like historical registries and stuff would allow that. I mean, has it ever been officially deemed a historic?
Yes.
Okay, because I was like, that could maybe be the distinction.
Yeah, so it would be too much to renovate. Mm-hmm. So they've kept trying to figure out a way to reopen it. But one of the things that makes it difficult, I think, I'm just going off of guesses here.
I mean, yeah.
But McKee renovated multiple times and added on multiple times. Mm-hmm. And if you look at pictures of the club, it doesn't look like it used to be a house.
Gotcha.
But I got a feeling there's a house in there.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, I can see, where like renovating something like that would be
it starts getting wonky.
Yeah. So you almost need to like start
like
over.
like structurally, it's just not able to.
You're not
stay
really able
together.
to do anything because it's probably like a maze.
Yeah, I could see that.
I haven't been in there myself, of course, but it just seems like the way it looks and the way it was described before just seems like it was added on, and then they added on to the add-ons and added on to the add-ons.
It sounds right for the time and everything too.
So just too expensive to do. It was, due to its impact on the Black community, declared a designated historic landmark in '86.
Okay.
But that doesn't offer any protection if the owner wants the building sold or demolished. The only it seems like the only protection that it has is they have to file to demolish.
Okay.
And then the Historic Landmark Commission can put a year hold on it to try to come up with a different plan.
Okay.
So last year is when she filed for demolition.
Okay.
And so they did put a year hold on it and have tried to find a buyer or have the county buy it themselves. It was actually offered, the county was offered the property for $350,000, and they said with repairs that's too much. Which she put it on. She listed it for sale this month, and it's for $1.5 million. So $350,000 sounds like a bargain. So I don't know why they don't just buy it
and sell it. Yeah.
But
I mean,
I'm not the county.
Start a GoFundMe to buy it and renovate it? Because we would renovate it into its current state, like the way it was meant to be, and reuse a lot of I'm thinking of town and the way they've repurposed a lot of church pews and old wood and stuff to create the atmosphere they did inside the brewery. We tear it down, build it back up the way it is, and then salvage as much as we can of the actual existing wood and whatever and use it interiorly.
Well, there must be more issues.
I mean,
because there's been plenty of
somebody would have done that already.
There's people taking action. I mean, there's a lot going on. I didn't get too deep into it. You can Google it probably if you want to know more, but there are people who are trying to save it. Yeah. So it's not just, I don't think it's just
nobody cares.
Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that nobody cares, and it's not just a money thing. It's just that there's but that's what I mean is there's got to be a way to just gently knock it all down, salvage all the pieces, level out the property and start from scratch, but rebuild it into the shape that it intentionally build it to what it ended up at the end, instead of it being, a house with all these pieces. And
money, man. I don't know. And there's a
Can
reason
we get
why
a
it got
GoFundMe
foreclosed in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
But you turn it into half of a museum and a Black History Cultural Museum. That's a big deal, all the stuff that was going on there. You do half that, and then upstairs we can have our creative office.
Sure.
Whatever.
Anyway, I mean, she doesn't even want to tear it down. She just, she's losing money.
Sure.
She says, I don't want it torn down, but I am a businesswoman, and
it is what it is at this point. Okay.
So,
it sucks, but
yeah,
I get it, I guess.
If no deal is reached by June 12th, then she can tear it down herself. But after June 12th, no matter who the owner is, they could. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens. If anybody buys it for $1.5 million, I don't know. A lot of history there, but she's in no man's land.
Yeah.
Obviously this county doesn't think they can, because she stated that it would cost up to $400,000 to repair, and so that's $750,000. So it's still, that's half price, but it's still not worth it to them, or who knows? We'll see.
We should reach out to her and say, if nobody buys it and you're going to knock it down, can we just come make a video of the external location? Like, we don't have to go in. Like, it'd be cool if we could go into it, but again, I don't know what kind of state it's in, if that's even, like, possible. But make a video on the external and then ask if we can take, like, a floorboard or just, like, a piece of wood or whatever to put on our history wall. Like, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean...
Because if she's going to knock it down, like, kind of what does it matter to her for a piece of wood to go?
I don't know. We'll see.
Let's
June 12th. Gotta wait.
All right. Fair enough. Well, you said that was in the 40s when he opened it?
Yep. 1944.
All right. Well, I'm going to take us just a little bit more current and get to a less happier time, I guess.
Okay.
So 1965, there had been a good bit of kind of turmoil in the years leading up to this around the country, and Charlotte had been primarily seemed to be avoiding all of the physical violence and kind of riots and things that were going around the country with desegregation movements and just, you know, the whole black-white chaos that, yes, still does exist, but, like, was at a very, very fragile point right then as well. And Charlotte had always had this kind of reputation of being much more progressive and nonviolent with everything going on there. And even though that was its reputation, of course, there was all kinds of stuff just sitting right there under the surface, because how can it not? And so at the end of that year, on November 22nd of 65, which was the second anniversary of when JFK was assassinated, 4 different houses got bombed in the early morning hours. And they were of 4 very, not necessarily high-ranking, but, like, highly vocal, like, civil rights advocates? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
My brain just kind of stopped.
Activists.
That's what I was thinking of. Thank you. So there were 4 gentlemen, 4 families, ultimately, that were targeted. And they were Reginald Hawkins, Fred Alexander, Kelly Alexander, which are brothers, and Julius Chambers. And there's actually 2 of them gave audio interviews for through this kind of local records. I was looking at your lawyer when you had said you had a lawyer with the desegregation stuff. I was looking at some of that.
Yeah, he worked with Julius Chambers, the guy who.
And that's what when you said that, because yes, Julius Chambers was a lawyer and was very involved in the desegregation movement. And so when you said that, I was like, wait, what was that name?
I skipped that sentence in my notes.
Sheesh. Fancy.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for it. I was like, ooh, he's going to say one of them. But no, alas. So 2 of these gentlemen actually gave, like, more current interviews, which was actually really interesting to listen to, because at first I was like, it feels weird to just let me hear some dude talk. But then it kind of comes back to that letter that I read for my story last week of hearing them actually speaking and recalling their experiences from childhood or from their younger days. It just made the event, like, so much more real and tangible, because you're actually hearing from the person who experienced it and who went through it. So it's less just words on a page and more real. So,
except last time it was still words on a page.
Yeah, but it's the first-hand account thing.
Okay.
Makes it different. Somehow, it makes it different.
So, yeah, not words on a page.
Well, this one was not words on a page. This one was an audio recording.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, there's this whole collection of information between those interviews. There's a bunch of old newspaper clippings, all kinds of photos and sketches and all sorts of stuff that they've compiled in this history section. And it's really interesting, actually, to kind of get all these differing accounts of it. And so in the interview with Reginald Hawkins, he was talking about where the people who targeted them had been like watching them and knew exactly who they were and what their schedules were, when they would be home, where they slept in their homes, what times they like, what days and times. They knew everything about them, so it was like very precisely targeted. Mm-hmm. And in his interview, he said that all 4 of them were bombed within 4 minutes of each other, which the old newspaper clipping said within 15 minutes of each other. So I think he was kind of tripping over his words there a little bit with it being 4 homes. So I think that's where that 4 came from. But he also said that he had some like FBI informant friends or whatever who said that like his entire house had been illegally wiretapped by the FBI and the local police and all kinds of stuff, because he was a very well-known activist for civil rights, and that he had actually run for governor at one point and did not win. But so that was kind of his thing. And then we also had an interview from Alfred Alexander, who was a nephew of Fred Alexander, I believe, but he was staying in the home. Like, he was there when it was bombed. He was just a child when it happened. So he said that in his memory, like, there were only 2 times where Charlotte got actually violent or involved in violence dealing with all of the race issues. And that was when Martin Luther King died. And that was just, kind of that misplaced reactionary aggression. And then here with the bombings. And he was talking about how the community like immediately came up and they were all like, we're going to go fight. We're going to go bomb banks. We're going to, like all kinds of stuff. But several of the leaders in their community were like, we're not going to do stuff we regret. We're not going to like fight fire with fire. Like, that's not the point. Like, don't prove them right of what they're accusing us that we are not, And so it was this whole big thing. And so like the leaders had earned enough respect that they were able to just like quell it really quickly, which was actually really impressive and really cool to hear him kind of recount how that all happened. And then he said that actually in retrospect, this incident is what really brought Charlotte together, because some of the, I think it was like newspapers or journalists or whoever, they had kind of named this the Pearl Harbor of the civil rights movement in Charlotte, because it was one of those things that brought more solidarity and unification to prevent further violence in the area. And so it was actually making more of the community aware of things that this specific section of the community was saying, hey, like, things aren't going right. People are threatening us. We're like all of these things. And it brought real attention to it. And there was actually a very big meeting at Ovens Auditorium, like immediately following the bombings, where leaders of both sides of the community came together and they're like, all right, how are we going to do this? Like, we need to fix things. Let's go. Because this November that this bombing happened was the first year that segregation was starting to be implemented. And so it was, just kind of chaotic in terms of everything. So a couple of, I guess, interesting facts to go along with it is that in September of the same year, so month and a half prior to the bombings, Reginald Hawkins, the activist, he had actually written a letter to the Attorney General's office and said, hey, my family's being threatened. There's like a lot of stuff going on. My house, my property, my cars, I think he had a boat. All of them had been like shot at. And then he worked in a dentist office, or I think he owned the dentist office, and like there was his name was painted out on the building and all kinds of stuff. And so he like sent a letter to the AG's office and was like, I want to have an investigation into this. We need to move forward. He's like, I've also contacted whoever at the FBI so that more investigation can happen, whatever. And this was maybe 6 weeks prior to the bombings happening. And then in January of the year following, he gets a like really short letter back that says, this is to acknowledge your letter that you sent us in September. we'll look into it. Like, that's basically all it said.
That's government.
I mean, yeah. But it's like,
par for the course.
Like, I'm sure that the bombings were not the end of harassment by any means, but also it's like, well, gee, thanks for your prompt reply, because here we are, you know, like, and it sucks. And it's, I think, just par for the course of our history, which sucks more. But a few other things, specifically because there were photos of the damage, and I feel really like douchey to say that the damage didn't look terrible, but I think I'm desensitized by like modern explosives and like all the crap we see with like terrorist all that crap. And so like when I hear bomb, I'm thinking like 9/11. And I realize it's not even a bomb, but like I'm thinking like severe major scale. And so I'm like, my perception is super off about it. But so I specifically found out that the bombs were actually just like a bundle of 4 or 5 sticks of dynamite, because looking at these photos of damage, like, yes, there's obvious damage, but it was less than I expected it to be. But I'm not saying that in a way to try to diminish what these people experienced and what the actual attack looked like. Yeah. So the other thing was the FBI did eventually start looking into it. They had it like nicknamed or whatever, Char Bomb, which is like Unabomber, but like this stuff that just whatever. Okay. Anyway, they did have, initially suspected the KKK, did some looking into it, and then dismissed them as a potential suspect. Okay. And it was really frustrating to the Black community because there were a lot of suspects and then no evidence and no witnesses. So ultimately, like, nothing was done. So they didn't really get anywhere. They didn't get any answers from it. So about 2 weeks after this meeting at Ovens, there was another letter written by like a concerned grouping of the community, or they named themselves a little bit, but it was just kind of
Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
No.
Oh, okay.
But it was just a bunch of guys who signed this letter basically saying, like, it's been 2 weeks and nothing has been done. We demand action now, not just more talk that's going to be put off and nothing done about it. And so it was a 3-page long letter, but all of the demands were basically like, you're going to fully integrate segregation and, fully integrate all the clubs, the schools, the sporting, like there were, the dual sport clubs and all the things. And that was pretty much all it was demanding. And so nothing exceptionally unreasonable in any of it. And so all in all, it was still this back and forth, but it was kind of that like breaking the level of what Charlotte was used to bring everybody back together and say, okay, let's actually move forward in a productive manner. So it's not totally different than our entire country's history anyway. Yeah. Like, it still is a cluster and it still wasn't fair in any way, but it was maybe handled better than in many other places in the country. Something else, I guess, is just one of those, like, obviously this wasn't the end of violence or oppression or any of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so a few years later, in 1971, on February 5th, Julius Chambers, lawyer, so I meant to say this a while ago and I didn't, so I'm just going to backtrack. But Reginald Hawkins was our activist. Fred Alexander was a city councilman. Kelly Alexander was the president of the state NAACP. And then Julius Chambers was our civil rights lawyer. Yeah. So with that, he had a law office. And so in February of 1971, there was a case in front of the Supreme Court that was about segregation in Charlotte, and he was part of representing that. And during that time, his law office was intentionally burned to the ground. And so that was a whole shtick, and that was even worse because as a civil rights lawyer, there was just so much information that they had compiled and obviously didn't have backed up the way we can today. And so it was just all gone. And so that's actually like a major blow, more so than even just like personal effects and things. Like, that was their way to move forward. But all in all, it's just kind of more of the same story of Charlotte does very well to be this kind of progressive, peaceful city, but there's still always going to be that underlying tension. And even today, that hasn't gone away. I mean, we were talking about these... the
pizza peel thing?
Yeah, so the pizza peel thing and all the protests that we had going on there. And then, I mean, 2 years ago now? 3? We had the riots and stuff going on in Uptown, which is that's actually a really interesting thing to me because obviously I can't relate exactly to what that tension feels like because I'm a white woman, but I was actually there for those like first nights of the riots. Like I was actually at Knight Stadium watching a baseball game, and they literally locked us in the stadium for a little bit and shut down the game and everything and then kicked us out. And so we had to go back to our cars, like past the whole wall of riot police and then all these protesters out there. And it was the first night and it was very like peacefully done and whatever. And that's what I was actually very impressed about all of it because like, yes, it was a very intimidating, like kind of nerve-wracking thing to walk through. But, you know, the police were just there chilling, doing their job, like very like stoic, I guess, like just I'm here, I'm doing. They weren't like just messing around or anything, but they were also not aggressive. They weren't doing anything that way. And then the same for the protesters. They were definitely saying, hey, like, we're pissed off. There's stuff that we're not happy about, but we're going to sit here and like, you know, use our First Amendment rights to assemble, and we're going to say what we need to say. And, you know, there wasn't destruction of property. There wasn't violence. There wasn't anything going on that first night. And I don't know all the details, but like heard that people basically busted themselves in who didn't even live in the city, who were more the perpetrators of all the chaos that happened the next few days. Mm-hmm. But to me, it was that first night that really spoke of what Charlotte is in this kind of progressive, peaceful community of like, yeah, we're not afraid to say, hey, stuff is wrong and we need to talk about it, but still doing it in the right way. And so I was actually really impressed by that. But it's just saying, you know, there is always going to be this underlying tension until we actually fix whatever is wrong. And quite frankly, who knows if that'll ever fully go away. But I just think it's some interesting history. And again, kind of those interesting ties of where we were and where we are. And they're actually not all that different, even though they are like significantly different. And yeah, just history does repeat itself. But hopefully we're at least repeating it on a higher level than quite at the same gritty level. And
true.
That's kind of what I got. I just thought it was really interesting. And interesting to see how it's still sort of playing out in certain ways in our city. But I think ultimately Charlotte does maintain that reputation of doing its best to handle things in the least violent and most unified way possible given the circumstances. And so I'm kind of proud of us for that. And again, I know I'm super biased, and so sorry if that doesn't jive with anybody else's experience. I'd love to know about your experience because I can only know what I know. So hit us up because I'd love to hear about it.
That's true. We only know what we know.
Yes, I know that sounds stupid, but I mean, like, you know, our opinions and experiences are shaped by our past, so I can only speak for being a white woman.
True.
All right, so that's all I've got. So I guess at this point, we'll just see y'all next week. So
like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to this at / watching it at.
All the things.
Tell your peoples.
Tell your people. Tell us what you think. Tell us what your experiences have been because, yeah, we'd love to have more of a conversation on it.
Yeah. I mean, the more people that you get to listen to this, the better the stories will be.
Yeah.
Just because.
Just send us comments with your stories, too, because, you know, we only have access to what other people have put out there, but we'd love to have more individualized personal stories that aren't quite out there.
Oh, and Charlotte Shout is starting. So go check that out. I think there's too much going on for me to even know.
Yeah, there's so much.
There's like big bunnies
everywhere.
There's like musical seesaws.
There's chaos everywhere. It looks so much fun. So go out, shout. Maybe we'll see you there. Yeah, I know, I'm an idiot. Duh.
All right.
But we'll see you all next week. And
Check you later.
bye.